Hello and welcome back to the Third Rail podcast. I'm Owen. I'm here with Adam, and we've got some exciting topics today, specifically the LA Metro. The D-Line extension opened very recently, and new plans around the RFK Stadium development in Washington, D.C. I think it will be very interesting. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I mentioned this before we started recording. These two topics have had me really excited the past couple days. I think, although we only have two topics today, I think both of them will be very meaty, and I'm really excited to dive into both of them.
Me too, and I know that neither of us are hyper familiar with the LA region or California in general, both growing up on the East Coast, but I think it would be hard to ignore the LA Metro and the progress they've made, and it's fitting considering that the 3-station extension on the D-Line just opened up very recently. It's phase 1 of a 3-phase extension along Wilshire Avenue in LA, and this is a really important transit corridor for people living in the Los Angeles region, and the broader system build-out is key to the city's plans for a car-free Olympics in 2028. So I think we should start with the broader system in LA. Adam, I know you're a general observer of transit. Your experience in DC has really shaped how you think about it. You've had the chance, like me, to try the system, but I think our experiences are pretty limited, but I'd love to get your general opinion on what they've done there in LA.
Yeah, LA has among the newest transit system. Believe it began in earnest in the late 80s, early 90s. So even compared to some of the more modern post-war systems, this is a good 2 decades younger than that. But in spite of that, LA is an incredibly large city. They have quite a network built out, but it's unique in a city of its size for not having much of a reliance on heavy rail. So when we say heavy rail, we think of grade-separated subway systems. Doesn't have to be underground necessarily. Could be elevated like Chicago or at the surface. But generally a system that could reach speeds upwards of 60, 70 miles per hour. Generally a system that's entirely grade-separated or have minimal at-grade crossings. And generally, these are electrified using third rail, although that isn't a must. And LA, the benefit of heavy rail is that they have great capacity, and it's generally pretty cost efficient. If you need to move a lot of people around, the per passenger costs in terms of fuel and labor and whatnot is unbeatable. But alternatively, you have light rail, which LA opted to build a significant portion of their network to that standard. And in contrast to heavy rail, the trains typically aren't as long. They often run at street level, although that isn't always the case. You look at Seattle, which we discussed in episode 1, has a pretty sizable independent right-of-way. Grade crossings are more typical, although, again, sometimes there's grade separation for certain important segments. And usually it's powered overhead with electrified wires. Again, not always, but that's how it's typically done. And LA, for a city of its population, has a significantly more built out light rail network than any other city in its atmosphere. And I think part of that is just the timing of when they began constructing this system. It was very in vogue in the 90s and into the 2000s when a lot of the system was built out. But also it's just cheaper. And that's a real benefit is if you don't need grade separation or don't need tunnels or elevated portions, one of the biggest costs, especially in a already developed area, which Los Angeles absolutely was by the time they got started on this, right away is a huge cost driver. So if you could save money by going at street level, it absolutely makes sense there.
So when you take a look at the LA Metro map, you'll see various rail lines and 2 busway lines. I'll start there. There's the G and the J line. The G line connects to heavy rail at North Hollywood, and it extends out into the San Fernando Valley. That's one busway. The J line is another, but it runs on street service in downtown LA, but that will connect you with Union Station and downtown Long Beach, similar to the Metro A line. Now, this is a system that has been developed pretty heavily over the past 20-something years, as we said. Maybe I'd expand that to 30 at this point. But what you have is the A line, B line, C line, D, E, and K lines in LA. These were all renamed in the late 2010s. They used to be colors or have various names. And all Metro rail lines, besides the B and the D, are light rail. So those connections to Long Beach, Santa Monica, or Pomona, the Pomona Valley, those are all light rail, while the B and D, which start at Union Station, they end there, and then one goes to North Hollywood. That's the B line. That's been built out for quite some time. And the D line, currently getting extended further down Wilshire Avenue, right now is in phase 1 of its $10 billion expansion. They have been focused heavily on the tunneling. This is happening underground. It's costly, but in a very important project.
Yeah, and you mentioned these 2 lines, the B and the D, and they interline for a significant portion through downtown. So really, up until this most recent extension open, I think it would be more charitable to call it one line with a spur rather than 2 separate lines. Now, once this first segment opened, and even more so when the following 2 segments open in the coming year, then you could maybe see the D line as more of an independent line in its own right. But it is unique how you have this extension going to among the wealthiest areas in the country. This new one goes straight to Beverly Hills. I believe segment 2 will have a stop right at Rodeo Drive in the very luxury shopping district that Beverly Hills is famous for. And then segment 3 will go all the way to Westwood by the UCLA campus. But that's one of the, I guess, both benefits and drawbacks of building a subway line in a already heavily developed area. On one hand, it's already expensive. You mentioned the $10 billion price tag. But on the other hand, the demand is instantly there. You see a lot of subways that build stations in anticipation of development, where we will build this line, we will build this station. Right now, it might be low density use. It might not have a lot of people. It might be farmland. I know there's some memes of like back in the day down Queens Boulevard of building subway stops to farms that eventually became some of the densest areas in the country. But this is the opposite. Wilshire Boulevard, if you go up and down from downtown all the way to Santa Monica, it's almost 10 miles straight of high-rise skyscrapers. So instantly when these stops open, ideally you'd have a ton of ridership right at the onset. And that's unique for rail transit. I guess it's kind of part of the problem of them waiting so long to build this transit link that the development had already occurred. But if you couldn't do it yesterday, the next best time is today to do it. So I think that is interesting to see how it'll shape out in terms of ridership.
Well, the LA Metro themselves project upwards of 50,000 new daily riders in the coming years, which could remove thousands upon thousands of cars from that very congested corridor. And I like the point you make about the subway going to places where there's already demand. Connecting the UCLA campus to downtown LA is a very important link. And then that will also terminate at the VA hospital, which can also drive a lot of demand and really gets down to what transit is for fundamentally, which is everyone. Serving college students, and the VA hospital gives you such a broad range of riders. And the VA hospital will help serve some people who might not be able to drive themselves to get medical services, and those who need the transportation service the most. So I'm certainly excited about the project, and I think it's great that it's going to open in time for the 2028 Olympics. Phase 2 and Phase 3 are each 2 station extensions to this project, and the Rodeo and Century City extension is supposed to open sometime in the first half of 2027, while the UCLA and VA hospital terminus should open in the latter half of 2027. And hopefully they can keep to those targets. The project is near complete, so I'm excited about this. I think it will be very useful for connecting riders during the 2028 Olympics, and it's going to be a great part of the broader system.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2028 Olympics. Obviously this project will provide plenty of utility for decades and decades into the future. But Olympics, something like this where you get the attention of the world all on one city, you get a lot of international visitors, many from countries or cities that have a robust transit network and they're used to taking transit everywhere and will be flying in and might not have access to a car. That's crucial. And I don't think it is an accident where this segment goes and why they decided to accelerate this for the Olympics. Many of the athletes will be living on campus at UCLA in the dorms. I think that's where they plan on having some of the Olympic Village. Plus some of the athletic facilities on UCLA's campus will be purposed so fans could travel to and from there. I don't know if the athletes themselves anticipate riding the subway necessarily, but certainly a lot of fans will need to do that.
I mean, we could do a whole episode about the Olympics. Not that it's related to transportation, but the way they've designed it, this is an Olympics spread out the entire county of LA and into Orange County. Part of that, a cost-saving measure, repurposing arenas. I am broadly in support of the plan there. But when it's so spread out, as is the nature of LA in general, you're going to have a lot of sprawl. People need to get from one place to another. And the organizers of LA 2028 have declared it a car-free Olympics. So these sorts of expansions, whether or not the D-Line expansion directly serves Olympic venues, there's hotels, there's shopping, entertainment districts along that route and along the route of the broader LA Metro map that will serve the hundreds of thousands who will descend to the city for the once-in-a-lifetime experience of an American Olympics.
Yeah, the last time there was a Summer Olympics in the United States was 1996 in Atlanta, which is also a city that had at the time, relatively new subway system that was utilized for certain events and moving fans and competitors around too. I think that's one of the benefits. People talk, I know we're kind of drifting away from the transit discussion here, but about the utility and the actual benefits and drawbacks of a city hosting the Olympic Games, and a lot of the stated financial benefit doesn't always materialize. But I'd like to bring up that the Olympics could be a great catalyst for local leaders and national leaders to really invest in a community and put money in infrastructure projects that is certainly useful, but might not have the urgency to be built absent some international event. And you're seeing that all across LA. They had I think the moniker was 28 for 28. They had 28 different regional infrastructure projects that they would have liked to see complete by 2028. for the Olympics. And those projects, although they will serve Olympic fans and competitors and media and everyone else in town for the games, those will stick around for decades to come. I know LA is building a new connection to LAX. That is sorely needed, a transit connection. And it's kind of like a spur line, a people mover system to get people from the terminal to a transit hub. But that's huge. A city of the size of LA should have a more direct transit connection to the airport. And it was frankly unacceptable that it isn't coming to fruition now. But then again, the best time to do it would have been yesterday, but the next best time is today. I'm glad that the Olympics could serve as a catalyst for that.
That was the other project I wanted to touch on related to LA, because they're doing a lot of important work, but one of the most tangible benefits to riders and tourists is certainly the new LAX Metro Transit Center, which connects to both the K, formerly Expo, and C line. So the C line has been extended and it terminates at the Metro Transit Center. The K line runs from Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and connects with the Expo and Crenshaw stop on the E line to Redondo Beach down by the Pacific Ocean. I don't know my region too well, unfortunately, but two different lines connecting to the LA Metro Transit Center. You can transfer if you take the K to the E, if you take the C to the A line, and both of those can get you through the downtown connector or the regional connector, to downtown LA. This is a huge investment for riders in the region. I think I want to be wary of us, Adam, looking at things too much through the eyes of a tourist, because that is how I have experienced the LA Metro system. I enjoyed it, but did note that very difficult connection at the airport. But this station opening within the past few years and the coming LAX People Mover should really revolutionize that airport to metro connection. And the People Mover will have other tangible benefits for people that also choose not to use public transit. If you're a tourist and you're renting a car, we don't want that. But the People Mover will help connect to the new rent-a-car facility or intermodal transportation center, which isn't the metro station, but can connect you to buses throughout the region. So I think that this investment, catalyzed by the Olympics, is really useful to both LA residents and tourists, especially those coming in for the games alike.
Yeah, and more broadly, even looking beyond the next 2 years for the Summer Olympics, I think that's very important. I think mass events like that, as we discussed in episode 1, could really show the promise of mass transit, about getting a mass of people to and from a very localized place in very rapid succession, where they're all arriving or leaving at a similar time. But beyond that, LA is one of the few places in the U.S. With a very robust future plan of network expansions and extensions. They've had several ballot measures, I think Measure R in 2008 and then Measure M in 2016, both passed pretty unanimously, conclusively. It's created a very long-range plan that they are continuing to chip away at. And granted, some of these plans you look at and you can't help but laugh. They have plans for things in 2050 even, for future lines or stations or extensions or whatnot. But at least they have a plan. And we discussed outside of Seattle, which we discussed earlier, I can't really think of a region in the United States with a long-range plan that is a network that's being chipped away at. There's certain instances of individual lines or infill stations or whatever it may be that's slowly being progressed. But a whole network or several lines that are designed to work in tandem, you don't really see that in the United States. And we discussed some merits of that, but it is interesting to see LA being one of the few areas to really pursue that prospect.
I agree. There are plenty of things that you can nitpick and critique. Some of the light rail transit doesn't have signal priority at the moment. And that is a glaring issue. If you're going to opt for light rail at grade transit, signal priority can truly speed things up. And another fair critique is the A line is the longest light rail line in the country. Trains can bunch together when you're running such a far distance. That means that a massive swath of the region is affected by delays in specific areas. And so while those delays can ricochet down the line and these trains do stop for car traffic, building it in transit, as we have seen time and time again, is the most important thing. So I'm pleased that LA has taken the steps to do so. They're opening these metro extensions, and they're in the planning and environmental study phases for other big projects that one day we'll discuss. But for now, I think they're in a pretty good spot. I'm excited to see the metro system shine during the Olympics. Adam, do you have any final thoughts before we move on to your hometown of D.C.?
Yeah, just one last thing that I've been thinking about, too, is you mentioned some of the bus rapid transit lines, too,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a component of a network. I feel like BRT is very polarizing. We discussed this with William last week. Proponents say it's the solution to everything. You could get transit quickly and much cheaper, but opponents say it often doesn't deliver the ridership that's promised, and people don't really see the appeal, and it doesn't end up attracting a lot of riders, and sometimes could be just as costly as light rail. LA has built a couple of these BRT lines, and in the long range plan, it's intended to convert some of those lines from bus rapid transit to light rail. And I think that's always the promise of BRT. It's like, oh, we'll build these stations, we'll build an exclusive right-of-way, or at least a dedicated right-of-way, maybe not exclusive, for transit. And then once the development comes in around these BRT lines, it could then make it easier to justify light rail transit in the future. You see that being the claim. To my knowledge, at least in the U.S., I don't think that's happened anywhere yet. And part of that is BRT is a relatively new phenomenon in the U.S., really only attempted in earnest starting in the 2000s. So you could argue that there hasn't been that time for the development to fully come in. But you see a similar argument in Minneapolis with a pretty extensive BRT network, is that, oh, we build these lines, it gets development in place, and then in the future, once the development's there, we could lay down tracks and make it a light rail. I think in D.C. as well, that's the justification for the Richmond Highway BRT that's currently being planned is, oh, we build this here to connect to Huntington in southern Fairfax County and serve all the way down to Quantico, to the base down there. Then in the future, that might cultivate necessary density for the yellow line to be extended. And I don't know if that's a super accurate approach. It certainly is persuasive. People see that and it's like, oh, that's great. And people who might not otherwise support bus rapid transit get behind it because they think it could be the first step to a future light rail transit. But I don't think the evidence has been proven that this is a very feasible approach.
One of my issues there, and I love BRT. When BRT is done properly, it's excellent. It's very hard to point to an example of a perfectly done BRT system. Oftentimes you see decent systems with some bus lanes, but some traffic through running. You see bus lanes, but no signal priority, or the frequency is every 15 minutes, which is pretty excellent by American standards, but doesn't compete with true heavy rail subway level frequencies. And it's just easy to get lost with BRT. William said it last week. He wants the permanency of physical infrastructure. That's not really where I come from with my critique, but when you do BRT, you have to commit to doing it fully. And that means signal priority, dedicated lanes the whole way, and built up stops that are as if they're built for light rail transit. And then the frequency must run as often as light rail would. And that's another place you can criticize LA. The frequencies on parts of this system can get pretty weak. And with bunching on some of the longer light rail times, it's easy to see passengers reporting wait times of 20 plus minutes for a train, even though the scheduled frequencies are often every 10 minutes. The D line that just got extended, its daily frequency is every 10 minutes with trains every 5 minutes in that interlined core between Vermont and Union Station. So there's definitely a lot to critique about the BRT. And I'd say for LA, the J line sticks out in that it has street service in downtown LA and downtown Long Beach. So that is an area in which the bus rapid transit just doesn't necessarily live up to the true promise of BRT. I believe, and I don't want to state this with 100% certainty because I could be wrong, but if I'm correct, the G line is bus rapid transit because at the time it was constructed, the local area passed an ordinance saying that like funding could not be released for rail transportation. There was some NIMBY activity. They wanted buses, not trains. You'll have to fact check me on that, but that's why I haven't focused too much on the G line. I think that is more of a result of NIMBY activity rather than specific planning for BRT. But the J line, it's got some on-street segments that do weaken it, especially when those on-street segments are in the downtown core. And like a lot of the light rail, you need signal priority, you need high frequencies to really fulfill the promise of high-frequency public transportation.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned the G line. I wasn't aware of that history there, but I wouldn't be surprised. Reminds me similarly to Indianapolis, where there is a somewhat built-out network of BRT, but it was specifically written into statute by the Indiana legislature that that could not be rail transit, that it has to be buses. Even though density might be able to support rail transit in that corridor of Indianapolis, they had to go with buses, second best. So I do agree that the sometimes political or regional impacts select the mode selection there, and it has an impact.
I did fact check myself. So for the Metro G line, this was a pre-existing right-of-way. It was Pacific Electric streetcars. That service ended in 1952. In the 80s and 90s, when the LA Metro was looking to rebuild, local landowners worked to pass a bill that prohibited the development of surface rail transit. It must be built as a deep bore tunnel, according to a 1991 law. So it was NIMBY activity that ensured that this was BRT. I can't speak to the quality of service. I've taken a few lines in LA, both the subway and the light rail. I haven't tried the BRT, but ridership peaked in 2013 and decreased on a slow decline until 2019, and service ridership rather has not recovered since the pandemic. That peak in 2013 was 9 million riders. That year, 2024, it was 4.4 million.
Yeah, and that's something I think we'll be looking at a lot across the country is just COVID bounce backs and transit kind of had a 1-2 sucker punch by COVID, that it's slowly increasing. It's headed in the right direction, but still far from where it was in January, February 2020. And in some places, it might never return to that.
Well, I think we've enjoyed our conversation about LA. I know that neither of us are necessarily experts, but there's a lot to appreciate about what they're doing. I live right now in Chicago. You live in Denver. I'm envious of the level of future planning that's going on in LA right now. There are certainly obstacles. California has a whole suite of environmental and construction review processes that make this more difficult. Yet LA and the local metro are chugging ahead in ways that our respective cities, and arguably DC, your hometown too, are not. Now, I know that both Chicago and DC have a strong built-out network, and in DC, they're looking at adjusting service for the planned NFL stadium returning to the site of the old RFK Stadium, Adam.
That's right, and that's going to be our second big topic of this episode. For those who are not familiar, over the past couple years, DC has laid the groundworks for having the Washington Commanders NFL franchise move from Landover, Maryland, Raleigh, Maryland, back into the District of Columbia. They haven't played in the District of Columbia since they left the original RFK Stadium in the late 90s. So they've been out for close to 3 decades now. And it was a big priority of the outgoing mayor, Muriel Bowser, to get a team back to Washington. Took some dealings with Congress because it's technically Park Service land where the RFK Stadium is. But the funding has been approved and ground has been broken on infrastructure, and I believe on the actual stadium next year to construct a state-of-the-art NFL stadium in the District of Columbia that will be designed kind of as a state-of-the-art facility that hopes to maybe be a paradigm shift for NFL stadiums. It's going to seat about 70,000 people, which is much less than the current stadium in FedEx Field in Landover, which at times had over 90,000 seats. They struggled to fill it, so they covered some up with tarps. But this will be a little bit smaller than that, but it will be much larger than the capacity at the original RFK Stadium, which was in the 60,000s. Mm-hmm. The city has built this as a rail transit-first arena, transit-first facility. We've seen that for other stadiums of other leagues, specifically like NHL and NBA stadiums have always had a transit focus across the country. More recently, MLB stadiums have been trying to become more urban and transit-oriented, but NFL stadiums have really struggled for that, and part of that's the culture of tailgating, which often necessitates a pretty large parking lot. So this has the potential to really shift things if it is able to be successful, and they could make this new stadium for the Washington Commanders truly transit-oriented. The plan is to have limited parking lots, have a single garage at the onset, and then the main focus, they're hoping to get possibly even half of the fans arriving by transit. So that's kind of the backdrop here, is how will DC and the transit agency of WMATA, which serves the District of Columbia, be able to provide transit service for huge game days. Mm-hmm. So if you have a capacity of 70,000 fans plus employees at the stadium, and you ideally want to get people in and out of there in an hour, that's kind of the goal that WMATA has set for itself. To begin with, you would need possibly 40,000 people in and out in an hour, and that's quite the undertaking. Even if you have buses to alleviate some of the impact on heavy rail, that's kind of where Metro's at now, is they have this problem. It's how do we provide transit service for these fans and allow this stadium to be as successful as it's promised.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the present day. I guess rather than the present day, maybe backtracking back to October 2025, the DC city government and representatives from the Washington Commanders and WMATA formed a working group, a steering committee, to analyze some possible transit efforts to supply this stadium. So at the onset, they said they would look at possibly a new rail station on the blue, orange, silver lines near Potomac or near Oklahoma Avenue. They talked about possibly studying a bus rapid transit, studying a kind of spur terminal, and studying expansions to the entrance and mezzanine and fare gates and vertical transportation, so like elevators and escalators at the existing Stadium-Armory station. So for those who aren't familiar, Stadium-Armory is currently located about 2 blocks from the RFK Stadium site. It was opened in 1977 as the terminus of the Blue Line. And even at that time, the then Washington Redskins and Senators played there. So you had events with a lot of people, and the station entrance closest to the stadium was built with capacity in mind. It's one of the only places with 3 escalators down to the platform from a single mezzanine. And the mezzanine was built especially wide at the time to handle a lot of people. But even with that being said, it seems to be insufficient for this new NFL stadium, because at the time, as I mentioned, the old RFK Stadium just wasn't as big, had about 60,000 seats opposed to 70,000, and it had a significantly more amount of parking spaces than is currently contemplated for the new Commanders Stadium.
Yeah.
So all that equals more people coming to use transit for this stadium. So I guess I'll throw it over to you as an outsider. What approach would you take if you're put on this steering committee to provide transit service to this state-of-the-art stadium?
Well, I have read the Metro study, or at least the takeaways from the Metro study, and I generally agree with what it seems the DC Metro wants to do. No new station seems like a very reasonable takeaway. I believe the plans were or it wasn't plans, but the study was for various stub stations that might get you closer to the stadium than the existing Stadium-Armory station is on the blue, orange, silver interline. Those stations would cost hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars and serve a new stadium. And I am always wary of NFL stadiums in cities. I have my own independent thoughts on this RFK Stadium site. I am unconvinced that this transit-first motto will last. Not to be so skeptical, but I do think that they're going to try and slide more and more parking into this stadium plan as it slowly gets approved. But let's say that it currently stays where it is, which is 8,000 on-site parking spots. I don't think that a new metro station should be built, because the metro, as it stands right now, is a very high-capacity system. Those trains can run at extremely high frequencies, and the location in the blue, orange, silver interlining is excellent for taking fans in all sorts of directions, easy transfers at Metro Center and L'Enfant Plaza to the various other lines that aren't connected at Stadium-Armory. So I agree with the Metro board on improving the entrances to the stadium so it can process a lot more people. And then I really like the idea for BRT to and from the stadium, which I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so for those listening along at home, I guess this might be a good time to interject what the steering committee ultimately recommended. They said that, as you mentioned, Owen, new stations would not be prudent. They looked at two designs in particular. One of them would have been an infill station at Oklahoma Avenue, which, funny enough, was originally contemplated and originally approved back in 1968 as part of the original Metro plan. But local community backlash got it nixed. And that's a whole nother episode. I find that whole story fascinating. But they said with that, it would cost upwards of $1 billion, which I find pretty insane considering this is an infill station. I guess their logic is that the existing track alignment is incapable of serving, of allowing for a station. They say it's too steep and not straight enough.
If you told me $500 million, I wouldn't bat an eye. Building it without disrupting service, that's an expensive proposition.
The station down in Alexandria, the Potomac Yard Station, which opened in May of 2023, it's the most recent station. That's at grade, and it's an infill, and it cost, I think, $380 was the final price tag.
Yeah.
Which is insane. So this would have had to been elevated or possibly underground. I was looking at some of the blueprints in the slides, and granted, this was very abstract brainstorming, so not finalized, but it looked like they were going to have to construct almost a mile of completely new guideway for the segment. Mm-hmm. And it looked like maybe they were going to keep it underground and have it surface later down the line, because the location of Oklahoma Avenue Station is right after the portal, south of, I guess that would be north of RFK Stadium. So it looked like they were going to realign it underground and have it remain underground, have a station there, and then have a mile of guideway as well to connect back to the existing network. Mm-hmm. I guess that's the D&G pocket track and junction. This is very technical, but that's some of the most unreliable pieces of infrastructure in the metro system. Those who ride it a lot find it very common to see a delay or some other track work being caused by the pocket track there. So I guess part of this new station would be to maybe rebuild or replace or bypass that. But upwards of $1 billion for a essentially infill station is crazy. The other design that was being contemplated was a spurred track that would have a new platform almost directly at RFK Stadium. But that spurred track would basically be a terminus. So I guess on game days you could quickly load and unload passengers, and I'm sure it would be designed with throughput in mind.
Yeah.
But something that I think could possibly be utilized there is maybe have it be a permanent terminus for the Silver Line. When the Silver Line was first being considered and planned, it was decided to terminate at Stadium-Armory. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they ultimately didn't go along with that is because of the unreliability of that pocket track north of Stadium-Armory. So I wonder if this could maybe be an option to return that terminus and maybe reduce service on some of the lesser used segments. But regardless, neither of those options were recommended. They were way too expensive for the benefit that it would have provided. The ultimate recommendation was two-pronged. One was this BRT, which is being branded as the Gold Line. I guess it kind of complements the Silver Line, which is the newest line in the metro system. But also the Commander's colors are burgundy and gold, so that is a nice touch in my book. But it would basically follow the former streetcar alignment. So it would have a terminus at Union Station, go across H Street to Starburst Plaza, turn down Benning Road, and then it would deviate slightly from the former streetcar alignment and actually have a station closer to RFK. So it would either go down a new guideway or possibly Oklahoma Avenue. And plans have like an actual transit center, like a physical building, not just like a roadside at-level crossing. Mm-hmm. But this could be unique. They said it'll be center running, so that's good practice. They say it would have signal priority. That's good practice. I am a little bit split. I don't think it'll be a great way to serve stadium traffic, mainly unless you live on that corridor. But I think in most cases, it'll be quicker to just take Metro because even if you live on the, I guess, eastern segment of the Red Line, and it would make sense to get on at Union Station rather than Blue, Orange, Silver, and Transfer, the bus stop at Union Station would still be a little bit of a walk away, and the headways probably won't be as quick as Metrorail trains. So between the transfer walk and the waiting, it might take longer. People might choose to do that if it's less crowded. I guess this could alleviate that. So do you have any thoughts on this Gold Line proposal?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about the route. There, it is a little. It's easy to see the issue with the route and who specifically will take it. I think one answer is people that are coming from farther away. I know that the DC system is built so that it functions as a park and ride at the stub ends, especially, some of those lesser served stations out on the Blue, Orange, Silver. So I'm sure that a lot of traffic would just drive to the Metro and park. But should you take a commuter train to Union Station, I know that in the longer run, they want more VRE and MARC service on the weekends. This would be a Sunday, so service is somewhat limited right now. But stopping at Union Station, connecting with the Red Line, I do think is the most reasonable route for BRT. And so I like it as long as they do what they say they want to do. And that's where things get tricky because we just had this discussion about BRT. You need those bus lanes. And even more importantly, you need signal priority because if you're waiting for 90 seconds at multiple signals in a row, the bus lane isn't even useful. So frequency, priority, and dedicated right-of-way are what would be key to making this work. And I think the busway would be pretty flexible, too. If this was a route with headways every 8 minutes, Monday through Friday, that is a pretty excellent service for a bus, I'd say. And then the flexibility of it being a busway means that on a Sunday when there is slightly less bus traffic around the region, you can bring in other buses that aren't in service in routes that might have higher frequencies on weekdays to beef up the frequencies for the 2 hours before and after events at the stadium, which in the Metro study, they say it could go as fast or as frequent as every 3 minutes. So I like the plan. I think they should build this whether or not there's a stadium coming. BRT would serve as a pretty great transit resource for an area of DC that is lacking an easy connection to the Metrorail. And it's hard not to note that this is the line the DC streetcar ran, which was a failure and recently ended its service. And perhaps we could have avoided all of this if they had done the streetcar right with dedicated lanes and better frequencies. But DC caved in one way or another to various interests in the the DC streetcar ran in traffic in the street. The headways were poor. I want to say it was every 20 minutes at times. And people didn't ride the service. Buses work out better. So if this is the second try at this corridor, they really need to get it right if they're going to invest the money, which means high frequencies, transit priority, and dedicated right-of-way.
And talk about getting it right. I think one thing that could be greatly improved upon is that interface with Union Station. With the streetcar, it dumped off on the highway bridge on H Street.
Yeah.
And to get to even Amtrak, it was a 5-minute walk. To Metrorail, it could be possibly 10 minutes of walking. Outside, uncovered, crossing three lanes of traffic. To do that, it wasn't good. I think the bus has some flexibilities. Maybe you could have it turn into the Union Station garage. I don't know if this would be too capital intensive, but Union Station has provisions. The metro station at Union Station has provisions for an entrance on H Street. I wonder if maybe you could unmothball those provisions and accommodate maybe a mini terminal in the garage and leads right into the metro station. I think now would be the time to do that. The other thing worth noting about this Gold Line proposal is that this is only intended as phase one. So phase one would be Union Station to the new Commander Stadium. Phase two would be eastward from the Commander Stadium up to Benning Road. And that could be unique too. That was always the intended terminus of the streetcar. That just never happened. Mm-hmm. At that point, it kind of parallels the existing metro line, but it could provide connection between Union Station and that branch of the metro system, which are physically, geographically not terribly far from each other, but to connect on metro, you have to go all the way into downtown and then all the way out of downtown.
Yeah.
So that could be useful. I question how it would work in practice. Not saying it's necessarily impossible, but I'm wondering if it's coming down Benning Road and then it makes that pretty extended detour into this new transit center at the Commander Stadium. Would it then have to undetour back up to Benning Road and then cross the Anacostia River and then go to Minnesota Avenue Station or I guess Benning Road Station? Would it provide really that quick of transit between, say, Benning Road and Union Station or Benning Road and Atlas District on the 8th Street corridor? That just makes me question the implementation there. Not to say it can't be done, but there are some question marks. And then the third phase, so phase one is serving the stadium from Union Station. Phase two is connecting Benning Road across the Anacostia River. Phase three would be heading west from Union Station, and the rough alignment is 8th Street to, I guess it would go up Massachusetts Avenue to the Convention Center, and then from the Convention Center head down K Street, all the way through, I guess, the downtown core where a lot of office buildings and lobbyists are located. And then here's a real coup d'etat. At K Street, it would go all the way to Washington Circle and then by GW University in Foggy Bottom, and then turn up Pennsylvania and go down M Street in Georgetown. And the final terminus, it would cross the Key Bridge and terminate at the Roslyn Metro Station. So the real dream, I guess, would be this Gold Line BRT that on the west end would serve, I guess it would serve Roslyn Metrorail Station, cross into Georgetown, the heart of Georgetown, continue to Foggy Bottom and GW, continue to K Street by Farragut Square and have a connection there with Farragut North, continue by the Convention Center, serve that area, continuing through Chinatown and then Union Station, Atlas District on H Street, this new stadium, and then Benning Road. That's a pretty great corridor. And honestly, that's a corridor that has been considered for rail. But if you're able to have this dedicated, efficient BRT, I think it could get decent ridership there. Granted, this is well down the line, and the initial proposal would just be Union Station to the stadium. But you have a lot of points of interest being served there.
You do. My only question is, how much overlap is there with the blue, orange, silver interline? Is there a lot?
On the furthest end of the corridor, it's close. So the blue, orange, silver line, basically west of Metro Center, goes under I Street Northwest. As it goes to McPherson, goes to Farragut West, and goes to Foggy Bottom before crossing the river.
Yeah.
This would go on K Street, which is a block north. K Street is a very wide boulevard, so it has plenty of room. And there, for over a decade now, there's been talk of making that a transit corridor, so that could be it. After GW and Foggy Bottom, it'll turn north up Pennsylvania Avenue to Georgetown. So that is a completely new market that isn't served. You would have some overlap, I guess, between 23rd Street and, I guess, what would that be, 12th Street? But on the other hand, that is the busiest, densest part of the city with the most office buildings, with an increasing amount of residential apartment buildings too. So if there's justification for some overlap, this could be made if it could be made anywhere in the city. But you are right to raise some skepticism there.
I just like that, similar to the way we talked about LA using the Olympics as a catalyst to invest in transit, DC has an opportunity here with a new stadium to make the case for a real investment and a real change to the fabric of the transportation system. It is probably too late. They say they can't build a station in 4 years. You're definitely not getting a new rail line out of that. And they're not studying that anyways. But 4 years is more than enough time to construct the infrastructure needed for fast, frequent BRT. And so I'm happy to see DC grabbing this opportunity and really running with it. And I hope that they do build this out. I hope that they get it started, because I think that that's always what's most important. You know, build that phase one, proof of concept, and then I hope that they really do see the project to completion, because I think it could be a really powerful addition to an already pretty strong transit network in the DC core.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Gold Line will be half of the transit network improvements for the stadium. The other half, which was widely publicized, is modifications to the existing Stadium-Armory station. So as I mentioned earlier, it has two mezzanines. It has a south entrance and a north entrance. And that north entrance was designed with a larger capacity in mind, with events at the original RFK Stadium. They've run the numbers, and they think with this transit-first Commander Stadium, even that larger than typical mezzanine and entrance wouldn't be enough. So they propose the creation of a second entrance, I guess, on the northeast side, kind of pointing towards the stadium by the Armory itself. And this would have a pretty wide stairwell that could handle a large amount of people. It would have more fare gates. It would add in new elevators, which would provide some ADA accessibility, but also capacity. Elevators could carry a lot of people, especially if they move fast. I believe the plans have 3 elevators from the street to the mezzanine, and then 2 from the mezzanine down to the platform. So in total, this hopes to almost double the throughput onto the station. The question becomes, this will allow more people to enter the station, but they're still using the same existing platform and the same existing lines. So I wonder if it's simply just pushing the buck down the line instead of limiting people at the escalators and the fare gates, whether that'll be alleviated and people could get through that quickly with ease, but then are crunched like sardines on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever took Metro to a Nationals game at the Navy Yard, and the Nationals Stadium is about half the amount of capacity as the proposed NFL stadium. But honestly, the limiting factor there isn't the elevators or escalators or fare gates. It's the platform space. You go down and it's shoulder to shoulder, and maybe platform screen doors, which we discussed in episode 2, could allow that platform to be even more crowded than typical. But I don't know if this will be a adequate solution or not.
Yeah, I think they're kind of hamstrung in that the options aren't really there outside of, constructing a whole new line, which isn't feasible to serve a stadium that won't have that many events. I definitely think that platform screen doors are a reasonable safety solution. That way, if you're jammed like sardines, you don't have a risk of falling onto the track, especially when some people might go to the game, be drinking. You don't know what the circumstances are. It's best to prioritize safety. The one thing I am interested in is I know that on their busiest night of the year, on July 4th, the Metro does, and I'm fond of the policy, open the fare gates at all stations. Trips are free. And part of that is to just process crowds, because when you're making people tap in and tap out, it can be cumbersome and slow down the lines. I hope for the system that they can build these improvements such that they can still process fares, in part just because it's important that people are paying their fare. For stadiums or airports, you sometimes draw a crowd that isn't necessarily exposed that often to the local public transit. You want that experience to be as best as it can be. So I would hope that they're planning on collecting fares even during the crush of crowds. And like you mentioned, the platform is part of the problem, or maybe the main problem. So fare collection can help work as a bottleneck during a massive rush.
Yeah, I agree. And on top of that, WMATA says they will possibly utilize passenger metering, which would involve like staff at the entrance with physical barriers. And when things get congested, they will almost like raise a rope and prevent more people from coming in until the platform clears out, and then let people come in. So that could be an option too. I would like to see fares collected. It's one thing if it's one night a year or 2 nights a year. They do it on New Year's Eve as well, to open the fare gates and have basically free access. And that's good for a holiday like
public
that.
Service, yeah.
It's a public service. And I think the New Year's Eve the last couple of years has been underwritten by Heineken, where the beer company has used that as a form of advertising, where they said, we'll pay for the fares that you would have otherwise collected. But for a stadium with 8 to 10 home games a season for the NFL, plus other events, I would like to see fares collected for that. I guess for me, with these new entrance improvements, the way I'm kind of analyzing this, and let me know if this makes sense, is basically, where is the bottleneck? So you want fans out, you got a big mass of people, you want them out as quickly as possible. There's 3 main locations for bottlenecks. You could have one which is at the, vertical transportation or the mezzanine or the fare gates. So that would be like, it's so crowded people can't tap in or have to wait to tap in, or so crowded people have to wait to get on escalators or elevators or stairs. That's one type of bottleneck. The second would be the platform space. This is what we're talking about in terms of what you kind of see at Navy Yard after Nats games, is that the platform fills up completely and that there physically isn't enough space, or people get too crowded, and then you have a risk of people falling onto the tracks. And then finally, the third bottleneck is the tunnel capacity. At the moment, WMATA claims that they could only have up to 26 trains per hour. If you have 26 trains and you multiply that by, I guess, 8 cars, and each car could have approximately 200 people, there's a certain amount of throughput that a certain rail line in each direction could have. And is that a consideration with a stadium as big as the proposed Commander Stadium, with the amount of people taking transit as anticipated? Possibly could you be butting up on that ultimate bottleneck? And I guess depending on which bottleneck is binding of those three, you might have different solutions. So on one hand, if the bottleneck is the fare gates and the escalators, the recommended proposal would probably make the most sense. You'd just add more fare gates, you'd add more stairs and escalators and elevators, and that should be sufficient. And I guess maybe coupling that with metering could help too. If the second bottleneck is binding, then there's not a ton you could do there, to be honest. You can't build wider platforms in an existing station.
Yeah.
You could maybe build these platform screen doors, which would allow the crowdedness to not be super debilitating. But honestly, if the platform is the issue, then maybe the idea for a station at Oklahoma Avenue or a Spurs station could be the move, because then you build essentially a whole new platform. So you get the same amount of people, you spread it over multiple platforms, and each individual platform doesn't face the same amount of congestion or crowding. I don't know if the platform is seen as a binding bottleneck. But then you have the final option, and this would be really tough if the tunnel capacity is the ultimate binding limit there. Because in that case, even if you build a second station at Oklahoma Avenue with its own escalators and elevators and fare gates and platforms, people are still getting on the same trains. So it's like, okay, you have more space for people to stand on the platform, but once they get on the platform, they're just crowding onto the same train. And if there's not enough space for people on the train, then there's nowhere to go, and that becomes a little bit questionable there. And unfortunately, there's no real solution to that. I guess you could have platform screen doors if implemented on the whole line, along with communication-based train control, could maybe increase the throughput marginally, maybe an extra train or two an hour. But short of building a new rail line, you're kind of stuck. So if that's a binding constraint, I would almost go all in on this gold line and just try to push as much people as you can away from the metro system and onto buses. So I don't know the specifics of what the modeling and forecasting is, which of these constraints is truly binding versus which ones won't be a problem. But depending on what that is, there's very different solutions to this new stadium service.
From a cost and holistic perspective, and by holistic I mean what will serve residents of DC outside of those 18 days, let's say, between Commanders games and mega concerts. It does feel like station capacity improvements at the entrances and the BRT line are the best return on public dollars, because the BRT line, I think, could, if done properly, really shine in shuttling people from the stadium to various points in D.C., especially Union Station, where they can connect to MARC, VRE, Amtrak, and importantly, the Red Line. If your destination is especially on the east branch of the Red Line, I think you might find, if they do this right, that could be the best route to getting home. But on the day-to-day, the BRT feels like the best return on dollars for residents of DC, because they gain a service rather than the owners of the Commanders, who are getting the stadium and there's already a public deal in place, just getting more improvements to shuttle people to their stadium for those specific few days per year in the fall.
Yeah, jumping on that too, first of all, the Commanders claim, this is their claim, and the city backs it up, Mayor Bowser claimed that the new stadium would have 200 events a year. I think that's patently absurd.
Does that include softball games for the rec league they're going to host outside? Because maybe that's it.
I would find that very skeptical. But you look at, I guess, Capital One Arena in Chinatown, and that has a full-time NBA team, full-time NHL team, plus concerts and comedy events, and they do like March Madness and other one-off things like that in WWE. They don't even approach 200 events a year.
Yeah.
So I find it laughable that a stadium with 70,000 people will be able to have that many events. And granted, it is indoors, so that opens up the promise of maybe one day having a Final Four or a hockey event, or they want to do the Women's World Cup in 2031, and I think that would be reasonably likely as well, but nowhere close to the amount of events. But on the other hand, they don't want this stadium to be just a stadium. They want it to be a catalyst for development in the Kingman Park Hill East neighborhood. So they hope to have new office buildings and new apartments and sort of make this turn into what the Navy Yard neighborhood down by the baseball stadium has become, where there's a lot of people moving in, and Navy Yard is almost busier on non-game days than game days just because people live there and work there, and there's restaurants and bars and things to do. So that's the hope. So I guess maybe the steel man of this would be, okay, let's build a new station on game days, even if it ends up being only 30 days a year for events and whatnot, would serve the stadium, but on the, I guess, 330 days that aren't a stadium event, they could serve the community nearby and serve new development that might arise. And sometimes a station like that would be a signal to developers that this is a up-and-coming area that you should build stuff at.
Yeah.
That's the steel man. I don't know if I fully subscribe to it, but it would be expensive. $1 billion is quite a lot when it would be under $100 million for the entrance improvements. And then I don't know if any estimates for the BRT line is out, but can't imagine that would even come close to $500 million.
That would be my guess too. Yeah, I'm with you on all of this.
I'm eager to follow along. I know I will, and they want it open by August 2030, by the opening day, proposed opening day of the new stadium. We'll see if they stay on track, but that doesn't leave a lot of time. A new entrance is currently being constructed at Crystal City Station, which I granted it's a little bit different because it's a fully new entrance and mezzanine versus this would just be expanding an existing mezzanine. But that broke ground in, I think, summer of 2023, and they're still working on it, and it won't open until summer of 2027. So that's 4 years, and at this point, they're going to have to get, assuming a similar timeline, they'll have to start very quickly on these transit improvements if they want it ready by opening day 2030, week 1.
Yeah, hopefully they can get started soon. I know it will take some political will and strength, but I'm hopeful that this can be the catalyst for the improvement.
I agree. Do you have any final thoughts on this? I know this was a pretty in-depth discussion, but I really enjoyed getting into the weeds here.
Oh, me too. No. I feel like I like what they've come up with. I think it's a good balance of practicality and usability, and I hope that they see this gold line through.
I agree, and I'll be following along and cheering them on. I think this could be a pivotal opportunity, just like the LA Olympics are a pivotal opportunity for that city. Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that'll conclude this episode, episode 4 of the Third Rail podcast. We appreciate everyone who tunes in. If you have any ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to dive into, let us know. But with that being said, I guess you just touched the third rail, and hope you have a good evening and tune in next time.